Hey everyone, welcome to the DarkCast. I'm your host, Jonathan Miley. The DarkCast is a bi-weekly discussion about video games and the culture that surrounds them. The show is divided into multiple conversations between myself and the various writers here on DarkStation.com. And the sections in this episode are a little larger than normal, but we have some great conversation, so I think you'll enjoy it. In Section 1, Mark Steigner and Brandyn Boyd join me to discuss From Software's latest title, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, and how its difficulty is different from previous Soulsborne games, and how difficulty intersects with accessibility. In Section 2, Brian Tyler shares his thoughts on the latest season of The Walking Dead by Telltale and Skybound. Warning, there are spoilers for all seasons of The Walking Dead in this discussion, especially Season 4, and then there are huge spoilers for the end of Season 4 around the hour 5-minute mark, and you'll hear a spoiler gong. You'll find exact timestamps for each section and the spoilers, as well as more information about the things we discuss in the show notes for this episode, which you can find on DarkStation.com. There you can also find the DarkCast interview podcast, as well as video game reviews, previews, and features. Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at DarkStation_com, find us on Facebook, check us out on YouTube, and email us at podcast@DarkStation.com. As always, thank you so much for listening. Now on with the show. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the DarkCast. I'm Jonathan Miley. Joining me today is, well, this is different. This is special. We've got two guests at the same time, something we haven't had in a long time on the DarkCast. We've got Mr. Mark Steigner.
Hey there.
And Brandyn Boyd.
Hello.
Are you Mr. also?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, you're all right. So today we're talking about something that is kind of setting the internet on fire right now. There are a lot of very heated debates surrounding the idea of difficulty and accessibility and design and all this kind of stuff, and it's right now centered around the latest game from Software, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. And I guess, is it... So, I haven't played it. As I said before the show actually started, I have a grand total of like 10 hours in the first Dark Souls before it made me want to just punch my head through the wall, and I have never gone back to any of those games. So, would you guys consider this a Soulsborne, air quotes, game?
I think I definitely would. Okay. I mean, it's, the core mechanics are very similar to other From Software games, at least, way down deep. There's a lot of similarity. There's a lot of difference, too, but definitely in that lineage.
Okay.
Yeah, so, the DNA is definitely there. Like, it's visible. You can tell just by looking at it. At the same time, I would say maybe that people approaching it as if it were a Dark Souls game, as I did when I first started, it is a big part of what contributes to its difficulty, actually, though.
Okay. So I guess first of all, let's talk about that, Brandyn, because that's kind of interesting, and I don't know if I've heard anybody talk about that specifically with how the game is difficult, where it's almost an artificial difficulty that you're creating for yourself because you're playing it like another game.
So for Sekiro, and it's something more relevant to people that, played a lot of Dark Souls, I guess, but I don't really know how it would affect someone that's brand new to a FromSoft game. But with Sekiro, if you try to play it like Dark Souls, which is, getting up to an enemy with your shield up and circling around them and kind of dodging through their attacks, it won't work. If you try that same kind of maneuver, the game punishes you hard from it. You can't really retreat from enemies if Bloodborne was about aggression, then Sekiro is that tenfold, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Bloodborne is similar. I mean, there's some elements that are the same in terms of pacing and combat. But.
Okay, so going into the game, I didn't expect it to kind of explode with people getting frustrated with it as much as they did, and well, I mean, I guess part of that's just the internet today. People get really angry about everything all the time now, more so than seemingly they did in the past, but they probably did. But how does it feel more difficult besides just kind of playing it incorrectly? Is there anything in particular that makes Sekiro harder than Dark Souls or Bloodborne?
Brandon, go ahead.
Well, there's certainly a lack of options as compared to Dark Souls or Bloodborne, which are more straightforward in their RPG mechanics. Sekiro just really has one set play style. It has a way it has to be played, and you can take as long as you like to come to grips with that, but if you don't eventually come to those grips, then you just won't be able to progress through the game. And aside from that, I guess you could make the argument that maybe because those options aren't there, like you can't be a spellcaster or something like that, there is a higher level of just mechanical dexterity required, although I find like the parry windows and stuff are actually, you know, more forgiving than what you'd get out of Dark Souls or Bloodborne or something like that. But it is the way you have to play the game.
Right. I think, you know, that's really true. But it kind of goes beyond that too, because in the Souls games, if you weren't good at one thing, you could usually find something else to get good at and get through it, right? So if you didn't have the dexterity or the timing, you could brute force your way through it. You could, you know, level your character, your weapons, or you could co-op with someone, or there was always a way through. But in this, as Brandon said, you know, there's basically one path to success. I mean, even though there are upgrades and there are, you know, skills to learn, it really does come down to, can you deflect and can you parry and can you attack? And if you can't do those things, you won't be successful. You know, for me, I've always looked at the Souls games as big metaphors for life, and they've always taught me, you know, big life lessons as I played them, whether it's, you know, relying on other people for help or, you know, commitment to sticking to something or whatever it is. But I'm trying to figure out what the life lesson is from Sekiro. I got through it, but there were many times for me where it just wasn't fun because it would take so long to get through a particular boss at the end. It wasn't a feeling of satisfaction or empowerment, but just relief that you didn't have to do it again. And that was something I didn't really feel in any of the Souls or Bloodborne games. So I'm wondering where the disconnect was, but I did have that feeling many times. Well, it wasn't really fun. I wanted to do it. I didn't want to give up, but the fun factor, I think, many times kind of went away.
See, for me, I can't really relate. Sekiro is probably the most profound experience I've had with a FromSoft game since the first Souls game I've played, which was the original Dark Souls. It gave me a lot of the same kind of satisfaction. I can't say I ever really felt very frustrated. For me, if Dark Souls was about cooperation, like you said, like that, learning to rely on others and learning from their mistakes, I think Sekiro is more about learning from your own mistakes and remaining steadfast in the face of opposition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that's true. The other element for me is my age. I'm wondering if I have the dexterity now to actually be successful in a consistent way. I mean, I got through it, but I'm just wondering, that may be the life lesson for me. I'm just too old for that kind of game, which would be too bad, but it might be true.
That's why I don't ever want to press on the subject too hard or anything, because it's certainly a legitimate point of discussion, whereas you did get through it, as you said, so clearly it was possible. But if something didn't click, if you weren't quite feeling the same feeling of satisfaction you had when you played Souls, then, maybe something is different, whether that's their design or whether, something fundamentally has changed in the way you play games since you played Demon Souls or Dark Souls.
Right. And I have no problem at all, with whatever design philosophy they want to adopt in that game. I think it's actually really brilliant. And I would never say that they should make an easy mode or change it. I think it is what it is. It may be the game that isn't for everyone, though. Of all the From games, I think it's probably, it's the least friendly. I would be interested in, the experience of somebody who's totally new to From games diving in with Sekiro. I wonder what that would be like.
That's interesting to me, though, because I feel like, didn't it appear, at least seem as if maybe they tried to make it more friendly, though? Like, maybe mechanically the game is more demanding, but it certainly has a more straightforward story. It has very clear tutorials. You can remap the controller. It has a training dummy.
Right. Yeah, in those ways, for sure. I think that's true. But I wonder if, that might have been a nod to the Souls players who had to also learn a new system too. Because I would think that the vast majority of fans for Sekiro are people who love Souls games.
Right.
And as you said, it's kind of ironic that, we play the Souls games in part because they're a challenge and they're difficult, and in some ways it's from saying, well, you want difficult, how about we entirely switch up the play style that you've been developing muscle memory with for the last 10 years, and relearn it again. So, Brandyn, since you've played it so many times, talk about replayability, because it seems like one of the deficits of this game is that, unlike a Souls game where you could do a second playthrough and totally change up your character build and a play style and approach to just about everything, you can't really do that with Sekiro, right? I mean, your second and third and fourth playthroughs are essentially the same as the first, given harder enemies and maybe a few other, things that you can develop along the way. But what's that experience like?
Right. So the replayability is definitely a major point where the game really suffers. It's the only really real flaw I would pick out, aside from the things that plague most FromSoft games, whether that be a bad camera or poor performance. But the replayability is it really has suffered without those RPG mechanics and without the co-op and stuff. So the only real reason to replay the game is if you enjoyed the story as I did, and you want to see the other endings, of which there are 4, and some permutations of that involve some like extra boss fights and stuff like that, which is cool, right? Because the boss fights are absolutely the highlight of the game. The real reason to replay the game is to fight those bosses again and just go back and demolish them, and that really see how much you really have improved at this game. But at that point, maybe the game would just be better off with like a boss rush mode or something.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think, you talked about the difficulty of From games, and this is in terms of what makes a From game what it is that it seems difficult, but really it's a learning curve. And, the difficulty slider comes from your experience and learning the systems and learning the patterns. And when you come back, the ability or the difficulty has been adjusted through your learning. It doesn't really have to be adjusted in the game itself.
Right. And I will say that, admittedly, and this is coming from someone that played a lot of Dark Souls, I don't know how it would be for a new player. The learning curve in Sekiro feels much steeper than it ever did in Dark Souls. Mm-hmm. There's one boss in particular that I think is going to be a roadblock for everyone that plays the game. And you fight him on top of a tower, and it's this big climactic point, maybe halfway through the game, 40%, something like that. And if you know the boss I'm talking about, I fought that guy for like an hour and a half or something before I beat him.
Are you talking about Genichiro?
Oh yeah.
About 6 hours.
Oh my God, man.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it's not that I couldn't get the patterns. I mean, because I saw the patterns, I knew exactly what he was going to do. but he's in 3 phases, um, Jonathan. So,
Mm-hmm.
The problem is learning the 3rd phase would be is what I could never get to because you'd have to get through the first 2 every time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought was very frustrating is, okay, I got the first 2, give me a chance to work on phase 3 somehow rather than have to slog through the first 2. And, I got to the point where I could do the first 2, almost without a hit pretty often. But yeah, it took forever to do that.
But that boss's placement feels very intentional to me, and I can only speak for myself and my own experience. But I feel like it wasn't until I beat that boss that I actually have learned how to play Sekiro, because I spent an hour and a half fighting that guy. And the time when I went in and I finally beat him, I didn't use a single healing gourd, and it was just over in minutes. And in any subsequent run through I've had of the game, that fight is over in literally like 90 seconds probably.
Right. And if you didn't know how to deflect going in, you would certainly know coming out.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that was one of those things where about hour 4, I was going, well, this isn't really fun, but I got to do it. And there was satisfaction in beating it, but it just felt at some point just a little bit much. Like, okay, give me another way of approaching this, because there really, there are some other little weapons you can use and a few little gimmicks, but generally they don't work very well for that. It really is a straight up timing and deflection, and I just wanted a different way, just for creativity. Give me another way to look at it, other than we have to polish this skill. And I guess that's what I think is, and that's true in several places in the game. There isn't very much creativity in the way you can deal with some of the bosses.
No, and that's definitely true. But I think the way we approach that conversation is that a bad thing just on Sekiro's own merit, or is it a bad thing only in relation to Dark Souls? And does that differentiation even matter when the lineage between these games is so clear?
Right. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it is what it is. Right. And I wouldn't change it. I think, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily enjoy that part of the experience, which is fine. No, everyone doesn't have to enjoy everything. That's totally fine.
Absolutely. And I do think Sekiro might be the FromSoft game that a lot of people find themselves not enjoying. I think the people that do enjoy it will love it. It might be my favorite FromSoft game. It's right up there with the first Dark Souls, but I don't think that will be many prior fans' experience.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, could that game, had they gone in a slightly more traditional From direction with, leveling up in a traditional way, or, character development in a traditional way, would that game be what it is? Or would it, be another Souls clone with slightly different mechanics?
Probably.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I admire their devotion to that mechanic. It's great that they had the courage of that conviction.
Right. And thinking on it now, actually, I for the site I reviewed Ring City for the consoles. Didn't you review that on PC?
I reviewed some parts of all the Soul. I mean, I reviewed Sekiro for the site, but I think I did, perhaps, yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, it's like, I don't know if you had the same experience as me playing that particular piece of content, the last piece, ostensibly, of Dark Souls content. But by the end of that, didn't it all just feel a little tired to you, like a little worn out? It's like another poison swamp, another dude with a sword. Like maybe we needed something a little more refreshing for the genre.
Right. No, I totally agree. Yeah, that whole game in general, despite the mechanics being really enjoyable as, mechanics as a fighting game, that was always fun. But yeah, the setting and the story and the trappings were a little stale by that time, for sure.
So from that, it sounds like one of the most refreshing parts of Sekiro is not besides the kind of added agility and speed of the game, it's more the setting that makes it a breath of fresh air. Would you agree with that or no?
It certainly helps. In my case, at least, I found the setting, it's less fantastical than the Souls games, certainly, and much less so than Bloodborne. Although it does still have some otherworldly elements that come into play very hard in the second portion of the game. But the way the story is doled out is more straightforward, although still really drenched in mythology and subtext that I found very, very compelling, probably more compelling than any of their prior games. Although, once again, I don't know if that will be the case for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's true. And of course, it being a Japanese developer and set in Japan, I think some of that comes across as a little more native and authentic, maybe because of the setting. Whereas the Souls games in some way used, there was some Buddhist mythology and Buddhist philosophy kind of mixed into European Arthurian myth, and it got a little convoluted at times, whereas this seems a little more of a piece, right? Because you're not delving into quite so many different mythologies at once.
Right. So Sekiro is, it definitely has some Shinto elements, but it is very heavy on that Buddhist theme, which they've been playing on for a while. Like you said, what I find most compelling about Sekiro, I guess, is the way that those themes play back into the gameplay and what you're doing as a player. So you take the idea of death and, because, in Buddhist terminology, the idea of life is suffering, and yet you're surrounded by all these things and all these enemies that are trying to perpetuate life endlessly while you seek to end it. And you have this horrible irony of you as a player constantly getting back up after you die and having to keep fighting the same boss over and over again and never just being allowed to stop and be dead unless you quit the game. And it's all very meta and interesting in that way, which is not unique to Sekiro. It's certainly present in the other games as well, but maybe more on the nose with this one.
Yeah, there's a bit of Groundhog Day in it occasionally, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. At least I felt that way every once in a while. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. There was the noble truth of suffering, but I'm not sure if the good news of the end of suffering was in there quite as much, but, My question, so Brandon, if you were going to, would you want them to make a Sekiro 2 or go on to yet another franchise?
I would definitely love to see a Sekiro sequel, and given the sales figures of this game, it's an impossibility, I think, that we don't get one, or at least some downloadable content. Yeah. The question is what Miyazaki and his team do next, I guess, because I would also like to see something new. I'd love to get a Dark Souls 4 one day too. I'd love for all of those things to happen, but obviously the company can only accomplish so much.
Right.
So I guess the question about Sekiro that's pervading everyone's mind, I guess, is always going to come back to the difficulty and whether or not it's a problem, though, right?
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a problem if you feel like, as everyone's discussing, every game should be accessible to everyone. But no form of entertainment or art at all is accessible to everyone. So as a musician myself and a classical musician, you could listen to a great work of art and not get anything from it if you don't have the tool set necessary to understand it. So
sure, but
not everyone does.
I feel like there's a difference between something being accessible to everybody and something being enjoyable to everybody. I firmly camp in the ground that you shouldn't make games specifically for everybody, because then we get these games made by, you know, focus groups and, you know, board committees, and like it ends up actually being for nobody. It goes down to the smallest common denominator, and there's actually nothing, you know, really compelling about the game. So that being said, I think, like, I don't like it when games try to appeal to all audiences, but there's an interesting argument to be made with difficulty in video games, because there are people that just physically can't play a Souls game because of whatever dexterity it requires or timing or whatnot. And I feel like that is a different conversation than just being, you know, that is making a game accessible versus making sure that everybody, quote unquote, enjoys your game, if that makes sense.
It does. And I mean, I totally, at the very least, sympathize or empathize with the arguments. It's just, you know, I actually play guitar as well, and I was thinking that the whole time I was playing Sekiro, actually, and like going through that learning process again, much like I did the first time I played a Souls game, that it is, learning those games is very much like learning an instrument in microcosm in a much shorter time frame. But it's a lot of the same kind of practice. It's, you know, repeat, make mistakes, learn. So I guess my question would really be, you know, what is it about Sekiro that makes it inaccessible? And when we talk about accessibility, how relevant is difficulty to that discussion?
Don't you think to some extent, though, the whole conversation about that really came about because a lot of people were finding it difficult, so they wanted to have that conversation about, you know, should there be an easy mode? Should it be accessible? And I think they're confusing accessibility in the same way that Jonathan explained so well. Don't you think part of the conversation was just, it's a difficult game, let's confuse the issue about difficulty versus accessibility?
I mean, I don't want to jump to accusations or anything. I personally feel like that's probably the case.
Yeah. There's a lot of games that are very specific and difficult and challenging in their own way, but they don't have that conversation around them. So what about this particular game suddenly created that conversation?
I don't know. That's the hard part to figure out, because it is a lot of the same names I've seen on articles before when they were talking about, you know, why doesn't Dark Souls have an easy mode? They are once again bringing it up for Sekiro, except this time accessibility has been brought into the equation. And I just sort of wonder why. And you know, talking about accessibility in games is good. And even if I personally feel like maybe this particular conversation has been disingenuous on some levels, if Sekiro can act as a springboard towards a more legitimate discussion about accessibility in video games, that can only be a good thing. But is putting the onus of accessibility on software developers really a good idea?
I think to a certain extent it has to be. I think there's an onus that platform makers need to pick up and kind of carry more so. But I do think, I mean, the people that are making the game need to be the ones that make the game accessible. I do feel like we need to have a more standardized version of what makes a game accessible. I mean, there are things like, you know, accounting for color blindness and the variations of color blindness, and you know, there are a lot of little things like simply making sure that, you know, your game has subtitles and that you can change the size of subtitles and other fonts, and you know, whether or not certain actions in the game can be completed by holding a button instead of just you know, mashing on it, which is something I'm always a fan of when people put that in, because I don't understand why anybody ever thought that mashing on a button to open up a chest or block a sword attack or whatever the case may be was a good idea.
And those are the sorts of features where I really do feel that, they should be standard. Certainly a colorblind option, certainly remappable controllers, and absolutely font size and things like that. Those things make total sense. And I'm not a software developer or anything like that, but they don't appear as though they would be that hard to implement. So they could at least be patched in at the very least.
They might not be hard, but unfortunately, when you've got people making games, you're always making a decision of what to include and what not to include. And while those things may not be difficult to put in, I think most of the time their value is underplayed compared to what else they're considering that they have time and money to, implement in their video game. And I think it's something that we're seeing more of with, the able gamer movement and stuff like that, where this vocal group is being appreciative of the video games that I don't want to say are tailored towards them, but just actually allow them to participate with the rest of us. And hopefully as that group becomes louder, and as other people kind of pick up that banner along with them, that stuff will become more standard and less of a should we put this in or should we put this other whatever we're considering into the game, and it will just become what a standard should be and is something that is standardized.
And just to make clear, if I think of a game wants to put in accessibility options the way Celeste did, with like slowing the game down and infinite life and this and that infinite boost, that's cool, good on them. There's nothing bad you could possibly say about that. I don't understand how anyone could possibly not like that. But if it's also antithetical to the game's design, then you just have to question, if a Sekiro 2, for example, didn't have those same kind of features, is it actively excluding someone? Because when I think about the act of playing a game, there is something very different about playing games that separates it from all other mediums, and that is the gameplay. So if you take the most recent God of War, for example, it has all these multiple difficulty modes, and you can play it on normal, which is pretty challenging, and you can play it on very hard. It's also got a very easy mode that, even your grandmother could probably finish. And you know what? That's awesome. But if you go to talk to your grandmother about that game and she played the very easy and you played the hard mode, did you all really have the same experience? So the problem arises when, what if someone with a disability, what if a disabled gamer wants to play games and they want to have the exact same experience as a person that's not disabled? I feel like the only real solution in that regard is a hardware solution, not a software one.
Yeah. Otherwise, it changes the essential nature of what you're doing.
So, Microsoft has come out with their giant turntable-looking controller that has, been pretty well received. I haven't used one, but I feel like that is a step forward. But then at the same time, not everybody has the same disability, and it almost seems like even on a hardware level, you're going to have to custom make your hardware per the person that has whatever disability.
Yeah, that's certainly the case, and I wish there were better solutions. There's nothing wrong with adding an easy mode to the next FromSoft game if it gets more people enjoying them for other reasons. Even if the way those games are designed right now, I think that would maybe strip away a lot of what makes them special. That might not be the case with the next game they make. Probably not, as a matter of fact.
It would obviously have to be made with that in mind. You couldn't, with the way that the game is difficult, you couldn't just tack it on and, boost your health and decrease enemy health or something like that. To me, I can't see how that would ever be a bad thing in a game. The only thing that springs to mind is when people enjoy getting to be a part of some group that they consider to be exclusive because they beat X hard thing. And so if you make whatever options that will allow other and more people into your group, then obviously that's bad. And that's a dumb way to think about video games or anything.
I don't really think that's ever been the case with FromSoft games. That sort of presents like the community of people that enjoy the Souls games or whatever is like exclusionary, and I think that community is actually quite the opposite. They're more than willing to lend a hand and help people ease into these experiences.
Then where did the phrase "get good" come from?
Yeah, I don't think that came from, but I think that community attitude definitely exists.
Oh, it's definitely out there. But I mean, get good. When it first started, it was more of a joke. That Twitter post that floated around a few weeks ago was something else entirely, certainly. But I don't think it's pervasive necessarily. Maybe I'm just not plugged in that same way. But
I'm not plugged into it either, but it just appears that way to me.
You don't think that From, in some way, though, played into that just a little bit with the design of Sekiro?
Not really. No, I just think if I'm being entirely honest, now that I've beaten Sekiro 4 times, I think it's actually easier on several fundamental levels than Dark Souls. Not all the time, but in certain ways it's easier, in certain ways it's not. I think it's just a different experience. If we were to ever point to a period where they really played their hand into that, I think it would fall more on the publisher. Back when Dark Souls was hitting its stride, with like Prepare to Die edition and stuff like that. That was maybe a bit heavy-handed, but
well, except for the fact that the game is Shadows Die Twice, so it is kind of baked into the title.
Well, you do mechanically die twice.
Yeah, that's true.
Shadows die all the time.
Yeah, shadows die like 10,000 times against a single boss.
So, I guess the ultimate question is, should Sekiro 2 have difficulty options?
I don't think it should have difficulty options any more than any of the Souls games have. I would say difficulty options in the form of different approaches maybe would be good. A slighter, wider variety of ways of looking at combat or character development. I would say that would be an interesting change.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I don't think it needs or should have difficulty options, but even in the first Sekiro here, there are several points in the game where you could become stuck on something, and that's okay because there's another path you could go, or another path or two you could go, and you could chase those threads for a little while. Maybe experience a little more, maybe learn a little bit more about the game and its mechanics. So maybe in a sequel they could expand that so there aren't quite as many gates as there are in this first game. Maybe present you more places you could go, more you could do. Maybe teach you more through the normal enemies than just the bosses. Make no mistake, I would certainly say that in terms of like objective, quantifiable accessibility options, I think Sekiro has more to offer than any of the previous From games. It's got a fully remappable controller options. You can pause the game now. It's got a training dummy and stuff like that. Certainly more than any of the Souls games. And I mean, remappable controls is more than 90% of games offer. It's just, I think the conversation about difficulty is blurring the lines for a lot of people, and it's making us approach this topic of discussion in a different way.
And unfortunately, like we can talk about this about author intent versus difficulty versus accessibility versus whatever else we can kind of throw into the pot. and we're never going to solve this. I think conversations like this are good, and I feel like we're having more of these conversations. And again, to what you said earlier, Brandon, I feel like there is, whether it was disingenuous to begin with or not, I feel like there is a confusion between difficulty and accessibility, but especially the accessibility factor of it, I think, is something that we're getting more of in the kind of mainstream conversation, and will hopefully continue to proliferate. But as far as video games go, I'm always happy when people actually get to make the thing that they want to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true.
So yeah, I don't think we solved anything, but hopefully this was just a good conversation to have, and will help continue this conversation that is necessary for games to continue to grow and thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, thank you guys, and we will talk at some point in time about something else.
All right.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Absolutely.
See you.
Welcome back to the DarkCast, everybody. I'm Jonathan Miley. Joining me for a possibly emotional conversation
Possibly.
is Brian Tyler. How you doing?
Mr. Walking Dead, Brian. Mr. Walking
yes,
Dead Tyler.
Yes.
Yep. I've officially changed it in the eyes of the law from Mr. Spider-Man to Mr. Walking Dead.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm glad that
gravitas.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you went through, legal means. You're not just like saying you're Mr. Walking Dead or saying you're Mr. Spider-Man, but you get your name legally changed like every few months.
My wife is giving me a real weird look right now, so we're just gonna extend the legal name and we'll just call it.
So recently you published your last review of both a Telltale game and a Walking Dead game.
Yes. So technically, no. My last review of a Telltale game was
last year,
2 months ago.
Right.
Yes.
However,
maybe it was last year. I don't know.
Anyway,
it was episode 2 of the final season of The Walking Dead. That was the last Telltale game. After that, Skybound Entertainment, which is owned by Robert Kirkland, the man who created The Walking Dead, came in and they've published the last 2 episodes of the final season.
Okay, so we'll save our conversation about Telltale for another time then.
Yes.
We're talking about The Walking Dead.
Just The Walking Dead. Mr. The Walking Dead. Yeah.
So, first question that I have, I want to talk about just the whole series of games. We've had Season 1, we had that 400 Days episode, there was Season 2, the Michonne miniseries.
There was the Michonne miniseries, yes.
And then Season 3, and now Season 4. My first big question about Season 4 is, I guess we'll start back with the first season. One of the most genius things about the first season of The Walking Dead is, for years, video games have tried to have some sort of good and evil morality code where you've got a slider and, you get good or evil force powers, or you're Paragon or Renegade, or you're evil or more evil, as in the case of Overlord, because who's going to remember that game? Mm-hmm. But The Walking Dead Season 1 was amazing because it told you that Clementine was watching you, and it did this thing where everybody would remember various things that you said. And they did some really great stuff with that, like killing certain characters right after saying that they would remember that. Yep. And so you don't expect them to die in that moment because, they're gonna remember that. It's gonna come up later. No. But it was really fantastic because I believe it's episode 3 that had the cannibals in it. So huge spoilers.
Episode 2.
That was episode 2? Okay.
Yep.
I was thinking it was 3. So it may have been episode 1 and episode 4 that had the shooting gallery. Anyway, regardless, it's been a long time since we played that game, or I played that game. But I remember getting to the end of that cannibals episode And I remember everybody loving that episode, and I wasn't, like, super jam up on it. I think part of the problem was I thought it was supposed to be a twist that they were cannibals, but it's, like, super obvious.
Yeah.
But I don't think it actually was supposed to be a twist. I think it was kind of like you're supposed to be dreading the fact that you know, like, the characters don't know that these are cannibals, but you know that these guys are cannibals.
100%.
And that's, one of those 20 things later on. But towards the end of the game, or end of that episode, you have the chance to stab a dude with a pitchfork. And I was mad. Like, these guys tried to eat me. They tried to eat my friends. It was not good. They needed to die. And so I stabbed him with a pitchfork. And then the camera, like, moves, and Clementine has seen you impale another man with a pitchfork. And I just remember feeling, like, grief-stricken, like I wanted to throw up. Like, I wanted to stop the game and reload from a save. But when I played that game, my rule was to stick with my decisions. Like, I could not undo things, which is why for 7 years now, I've left duck hanging. That's just a thing that happened.
Yep.
I didn't mean to, It's not something I intended to do. I was just clicking on all the other things in the environment, and then all of a sudden, Duck was disappointed. And, I don't reload Walking Dead saves, so I didn't do it.
Duck remembers, as do the rest of us.
But deep callback to, like, beginning of the DarkCast there. The first version, when we first started counting. Not the second time. But I remember having that moment, and where, like, Clementine has seen you kill another human being, and just, like, realizing the genius of this. Of, like, I don't want to do good because it's some obligatory meter, even though it is. Clementine is just code. She's just part of the game. It's not real. But because that code has the facade of a human being that, over the course of a game, like an episode you care about, and especially over the course of 5, like, it was just amazing at how I never want to do the bad thing in a video game anyway.
Yep.
But even more so, like, Clementine was always my utmost priority. Making sure that she was safe, making sure that she was prepared, and making sure that I was my best person to be an example for her. And a little bit, like in The Last of Us, I feel like you kind of get that, but you're not really Joel in that game. You're controlling him in combat, but Joel is his own person, and he makes decisions that you may or may not agree with throughout that game. So you don't really get the same sense of ownership that you do in The Walking Dead. And I don't know.
It's a different feeling altogether.
Yeah. I'm just saying that it's probably the closest thing that I can think of as far as having that kind of, I don't want to say ownership, that's not the right word, but just that kinship, that responsibility for another character in a video game and them impacting your decisions.
Yeah. I can't think of another one like that. And one certainly was super influential in that way, and I think it made it was kind of a shock to people.
Yeah. Especially when, like, their 2 previous games were Law and Order, and the Jurassic Park game.
Oh, they had that one. Well, they did a Back to the Future game,
right? But like
the
most previous,
the most recent to that, exactly.
Right before The Walking Dead came out, they came out with Jurassic Park and Law and Order, and I know I didn't receive Law and Order well. I don't think many people received Jurassic Park. Well, either.
Jurassic Park was really a test run for what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
It kind of hewed way too close to the main story, and they tried to do. I think they tried to get too fancy with it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the presentation of what they did with Jurassic Park,
right.
that was you could see where The Walking Dead came out of that.
Sure.
It was only when you applied like the writing of I forget the names of the guys who kind of were basically the showrunners for that first season.
It's a bunch of the people that are now at Campo Santo, which is now part of Valve. I think Gary Whitta?
Waltman, Gary Whitta,
Sean Vanneman.
Yeah, he did. Gary Whitta wrote episode 4.
Yeah,
I remember that. But yeah, Sean Vanneman. So it was like under the direction of those guys when with the addition of this, with this They Will Remember thing.
Mm-hmm.
That really took off, and that first season was great because you had this external force in Clementine that you became invested in, and so you wanted to make sure that Clementine was going to be okay. And I think that when they went to season 2, and I still look at season 2 as being probably one of their biggest mistakes, because they put you in control of Clementine.
Right.
As she is a kid. So she can't be any more than like 8 or 9 in season 2. And because of the way
it's been what, like a year or so, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. It was very close, but she's still a kid. And she is put into positions in episode 2 because you are the player character. She's put in positions in season 2, I mean, that a kid, even in that situation, in a group of adults, would not be put into.
Mm-hmm.
You would not, if you were trying to survive the zombie apocalypse, you would not look at the 9-year-old in your group and go, okay, listen, should we go to the museum and hide out? Or should we go to this open air range and hide out? That's, especially having like a 7 and a 5-year-old, I would not depend on those two to pick the right, well, maybe the 5-year-old. But otherwise, I would not depend on the 7-year-old for sure to pick the right place for us to go. And those were decisions that regularly fell on the player character as Clementine. And it didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. And you didn't there wasn't that Clementine will remember thing.
Right.
And so she wasn't learning, and you weren't teaching her anymore. She was just your conduit into this world. So it was awkward.
Yeah. And I always just thought it would be a great, not really mechanic, but it would be great as a player to kind of see the fruits of your decisions from season 1, not in a like Mass Effect, these plot lines connect here or there, but basically you have kind of formed the worldview of this child throughout a season, and in the next season, how Clementine reacts to things, she's just another character in the game, but how she reacts to things, how what she believes about the world, the way that she behaves, the way that she talks even, are reflected by kind of Lee's investment in her in that first season. I always thought that would be super interesting and a very satisfying thing. If it worked, I'm sure that would be incredibly difficult to do.
So you don't actually get that until season 3.
Okay.
Because in season 3, they do the right thing again, and season 3 is told from the viewpoint of an ex-baseball player named Javier. And it's really about his family, and Clementine comes in during the first episode as like a secondary character who then ends up sticking around. And at the beginning of that episode, you make it, because of the way I guess they did it, and because I didn't have any saves left over when they eventually did do the third season. Because of that, I had to go. They had like a little primer beforehand, and it was like a real quick, hey, these are the 4 or 5 main things that happened in season 1 with Lee, and that happened in season 2. How did they shape Clementine? And so, what was the main lesson? Did Lee teach her how to shoot a gun? What was the main lesson that he taught her? Was, to be just, to do this. Who did she take out? Did she end up killing Kenny in season 2? Did she end up going with I forget what her name is at the end of that. But it's like, so what happened here? So that we know when Clementine comes in season 3, when she does enter, that this is the personality that she's going to have.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it is. And so in season 3 also brings, through Javier, you interact with Clementine, but Clementine, that kind of core of Clementine is already there. And she's, at this point, she is, I would say probably, she's either, but she's probably closer, but she's between like 11 and 13. So it's a couple of years past at season 2. She has, up until this point, she was raising, in season 2, you meet a couple, and they have a baby, and their baby's name is Alvin Jr. And they named after his dad as Junior's arm. I don't have to explain that.
Yeah.
And so the parents end up dying. She ends up taking Alvin Jr. with her, and she ends up becoming the surrogate parent to Alvin Jr. And through season 3, you learn why she no longer has custody of Alvin, like what happened there, and it ends up being involved with Javier's family. And then kind of how she gets back to the point where she knows where he is, so she can go get him. That's her main goal. And during the process of that, like she learns some stuff from Javier, and then she ends up helping Javier kind of get the remnants of his family back together.
Okay.
So it's a neat thing where she still has moments where she reminisces about things in the past, and kind of you see those lessons where she learned, but she's got a very clear goal, which is good, and it's kind of to get back the kids she was taking care of. And then that takes us to season 4, and season 4 is kind of a mirror season 1.
Okay.
Because at the start of season 4, she is probably 14 or 15. Alvin Jr. is 5 at the most. And she has taught this kid how to shoot, just like Lee taught her. If that's kind of the way you went, she's teaching him steps to survival. So they have a rule, like always go together. When you see a monster, you hide. If it comes for you, you shoot. You either hit it or you shoot it in the head. You take things out as quickly as possible. And what starts happening during season 4 is season 4 comes back to this, and instead of Clementine will remember, it's Clementine as the teacher. So you're in control of Clementine again, but this time she's also surrounded by, she ends up at a school where she's surrounded by her peers for the first time. And so she gets to become a leader, and she gets to take on the role of Lee.
Okay.
And she's trying to teach Alvin how to kind of survive in this world, and he's having to make these really weird choices on his own based on what you teach him, that like this 5-year-old should never have to make, but he's having to grow up like this. And so this game has some really, and I think it also shows like kind of the maturity of Telltale's writing from season 1, where you have, this kind of almost like binary, like, how is Lee going to react to this kind of stuff? To Clementine trying to, at one point in season 1, or at one point in episode 1 of season 4, there is you're in the school. There are some revelations that are made about some of the kids that had disappeared from the school. You find out that somebody at the school is responsible for it. There's this really big standoff at the end of the episode where, because of the choices I made, Clementine is able to talk this kid down. This kid had a gun. She's able to talk him down to the point where he is no longer, at that point, he is no longer a threat. But because of the things that she had taught him earlier in that episode, Alvin shoots this dude in the head straight up.
Oh.
And then she's stuck, then she's kind of teaching him, well, like listen, what I had talked him down, that wasn't necessary. Alvin comes back with, he had a gun, he was threatening everybody. That is a monster. We kill monsters. And then she's forced to kind of explain to this kid like what murder is, and that, you know, what he did, was it wrong? And then using that example stretched through the episodes as he kind of learns different things. There's a point where you get to that final episode where Clem is hurt. She's depending on, she's depending on Alvin to kind of not carry the weight, but help her out in various instances. And Alvin kind of stops her and he's like, listen, I understand. He's like, I know I'm young, but I understand, there are things that I've grown to understand. And one of them is, I don't think your definition of murder matters anymore. He's like, you're my family. I have to protect you. And sometimes that means that I have to hurt people who need hurting. And you need to trust me enough to know that I can tell the difference between good and bad. And it's like, I'm staring at the screen almost aghast that this 5-year-old is having this conversation with Clementine, and that he's right. Because I think in all the things that we've ever considered about The Walking Dead, everybody who's remembered what life was like before the zombies, even Clem, who was super young, they were all we try to hold on to these, to the weird pillars and structures of society. And at that point, AJ has known nothing but that world.
Yeah.
And he's come to the understanding that, look, at this point, I don't think I have no basis for comparison. I don't think your world is ever coming back. This is the world we're living in. These are the choices I have to make. And they give you, it's this remarkable option. At that point, you get kind of like the telltale choice, and it's trust AJ or tell him he's wrong. And at that point, for me, I was like, okay, no, you know what? That is a super adult point you just made. I have nothing to refute that. I think you're right. I will trust you. I chose trust. Later on in that episode, there comes a point where you would make the telltale decision as far as who to save. And because Alvin is the one in the gun, Alvin makes the decision.
Yeah.
And you watch it play out as Clem because you don't have that control anymore. And so he makes the decision, and then he explains, this is exactly why I made it. This is what was going to happen. This is what I saw was going to happen. I'm not apologizing for this. And you're like, holy crap, man. I've raised this little tiny adult. And they do, the last kind of super cool thing they do regarding that is at the end of episode 4, after everything's gone, and they give you those screens at the end that show you what your choices were, and how many people, what percentage chose this and what did that. At the end of that, they have it's like a full screen. It's almost like a note card, and it said, "These are the lessons Alvin learned." And it kind of spells out all the choices you've made through 4 and all the things that you've taught him. That hey, you can do this, but sometimes you have to do this, and that it's not okay to torture people unless you need something, and then you might have to torture people. And it's weird seeing the weird dichotomy of choices that I made, and then how they affected the programming, the programming and the character that made Alvin Jr. into being.
Yeah.
And I think that was the end game, as it were, when it came to what we ended up doing with Lee in season 1 and what we end doing with Clementine in season 4. It was a really nice kind of bookend on their part to end it the way they did.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
And you just made me realize that I would not survive in the apocalypse, not because of all the stupid things that there are quizzes on stuff online about how many zombies could you fight before you died, or whatever the case may be. But I just wouldn't be able to let go of old moral codes and stuff. In season 1 as Lee, I couldn't make Clementine kill me.
Yeah.
Even though there was this voice in my head that told me she kind of needs to do it because she's going to have to kill people she cares about in the future.
Yeah.
But the other side of my brain said, fuck, she's like 6 years old. I can't tell her to shoot me. Like, I would rather just suffer and become a zombie that is eternally chained to this radiator than to have to tell this little girl to kill me.
Okay, so...
Interesting.
At this point, do you want spoilers for the end of episode 4?
Yes.
Do we want to go there?
I want them. I need them now. I didn't really care before this conversation started, but now I need to know. So spoiler warning.
Throw up the spoiler gong. This is where it gets real. So episode 4. So first thing you should know is that during this 4 parts of episodes where she ends up at the school and she's teaching these kids how to survive on their own. And there was this group that was poaching kids from the school. This group was led by Lily, the girl, or the daughter of the dude whose head got smashed in the freezer in season 1.
Oh,
the one that was left by the side of the road.
Okay.
Lily lived, and she is in charge of this group that is poaching these kids to serve as like child soldiers at this delta where they were fighting this other group. So Clem ain't having none of that. So some of the kids get kidnapped. One of her friends, Violet, and in this you actually form. So there's this kid Lewis, who's like 16 or 17, and then there's this girl Violet. And so depending upon your choices, and I kind of looked back to see what was, you can have a relationship with either Lewis or Violet, like an actual romantic relationship.
Okay.
I really liked Lewis as a character. He was kind of silly, and which was like novel for being in the end times, and he was a musician. So I was like, you know what? I think Clementine would be attracted to that. So that's the way I'm going to go with this.
Okay.
And so some of the decisions came about saving Lewis, and one of them is save Lewis or save Violet. And I was like, I'm saving Lewis. I'm going to be selfish with this. So they take Violet to the boat. And so she forms a plan with the kids. They go to the boat. They cause a distraction. A group of them get on the boat. They kind of get captured. They end up breaking out. The boat ends up exploding. And so there's a group of 4 that's kind of going off the boat, and it's Clementine, Alvin Jr., Lewis, and then it's Tennessee. Tennessee is this little boy he's a little older than Alvin. And one of the first kids that were poached were his sisters. And they told her that she was dead, and then he finds out that one of them was not actually dead. They were serving on the boat with Lily. So we're getting through, like the 4 of them are trying to get back to the school. They get to this rickety old, almost Sleepy Hollow bridge, one of those big covered bridges that's all wood, that like in Beetlejuice the couple ends up like kind of going over the side of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's one of those, and it's old and it's rickety, and as they're crossing they see that part of it's out, so they have to jump, and as they're jumping over, the sister comes back, and she is getting mauled. Like, she's got zombies behind her because she's been making all this racket. So the walkers are coming up behind her. She's like, she's going after Clementine. Like, she's like, you've done all this. You blew up my chance. You're running away with my brother. And so Clementine, she's fighting off some, she's shooting some zombies with her bow and arrow. And she goes to jump over this thing. She goes to kind of jump over this bridge, and the sister slashes Clementine's foot with an axe. And so Clementine has this big old gash in her foot. She kind of stumbles. She makes it over. She gets over to the other side, and this is that situation I was talking about where Alvin had to make a choice because Clem wasn't in the position to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And Tennessee is trying to get back to his sister. And Lewis is still across the bridge, and Lewis is holding on to him. And the zombies are coming over this truck. And it's like, if Lewis doesn't go now, Lewis is going to die, and if Tennessee won't listen, and so Alvin, despite the fact that Tennessee is his friend, as he puts it later, Alvin shoots Tennessee because he's like, we're not losing Lewis. This kid is going to get you killed. So the two of them, they end up, Lewis kind of gets over the bridge. They end up all right. Clem is hurt. More zombies start coming. Lewis ends up over. He is able to climb a fence, and Clem is like, "Don't worry, me and Alvin will get away. You go back to the kids. Come find us, or come. You go safe. We'll be all right." So to the right, there's this kind of rocky hill face, and she fights off a couple of them as best she can. She boosts Alvin over the rocks, and then you start to climb. And you're doing the whole kind of climb, QE to kind of get her up the rocks. Mm-hmm. It's doing this from like a downward position with the camera, so you can see the zombies coming. And one gets to the bottom and grabs her foot, and it's the foot that's injured, and it pulls it down, and you're fighting and you're hitting Q trying to get it back up, and the zombie freaking bites the wound. Mm. I'm staring at the screen like, oh my God, why is this happening? What is going on here? Tell me this is not. It did bite the wound. Great. She ends up kicking it off. She gets up on top of the rocky thing. And she's like, she looks at Alvin and it's like, Alvin, I got bit. And Alvin's like, what? Okay. And she goes, but come on, we gotta go. We'll be fine. She's making her way through the woods. She's kind of got a makeshift crutch at this point. Alvin's kind of semi-carrying her as best as like a 5-year-old can. And they see this barn. And she is starting to fade really fast now. And it was very reminiscent of like that last run that Lee made to get like to the apartment where she was with that weird dude.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, listen, he's got zombie arm. I got like this hatchet. I got this piece of glass. I'm cutting zombies to get in here. Very reminiscent of that. They get into the barn. Clementine kind of flops down on this haystack. And she's like, we got to close the barn. They can't get in here. And Alvin's like, don't worry. I got this. And he hands Clementine the gun. And he's like, cover me. And so you take over as Alvin. And I'm like, oh God, this is where it starts to happen. Mm. And so as Alvin, and it's funny because up until this point, you didn't realize kind of how slow Clem was moving until you start playing as Alvin, and this little kid is really zippy. And so you're like, oh, I'm picking up speed, So he goes. I close the first barn door. I get to the second kind of barn, like a barn door where it's the kind of doors where they keep the horses. Yeah. So I close, I go to close the second one, and the zombie's going to go in, and so I kind of stab him with the little boot knife that he's got and close that door. And then it kind of switches back. You switch back to Clementine, and you've got to shoot a couple of zombies, and then it goes to, you're back to Alvin, and you're closing some more doors. And so finally, you get all the doors closed. They're not coming in, and Clem looks super bad. And so at this point, she hands the gun back, and she, you get the Lee choice again. And earlier, like episode 3, they made this arrangement that it was like, if any of us get bit, we got to shoot the other one. And AJ was not happy with that, but AJ eventually kind of acquiesced to that. And so it comes down to, are you going to, do you shoot me or leave me? Now, like we had discussed earlier, I was one of those people where I could not tell Clementine as a child to shoot Lee.
Right.
I decided, I was like, no, you know what? AJ's got to do this. And so I as Clementine, I was like, AJ, you need to shoot me. I do not want to change. And AJ's fighting this the whole time, and he's like, no, I really don't want to do this. And she's like, AJ, I don't want to go out like that. I need you to do this for me. And for the first time in like Walking Dead history, like AJ raises the gun and they cut the scene. Like every other time with Duck, with like the kid up in the attic, Anybody that you've needed to shoot in that particular moment, they've made you do the deed.
Right.
They don't with AJ. They cut the scene, and it ends up cutting to a flashback. And it's the night that Clementine found AJ again. That where he was being hid, and how she breaks into the this warehouse place is being raided, and their defenses have fallen. Zombies are coming in. She's busting her way in to go get AJ. And she finds him, and they hug, and he remembers her even though he's young, and so she gets him in a car, and they drive away, and it's the car that you had started episode 1 in. And so it flips. So after that scene where you see, she's like, I'm going to protect you. We're going to get out of this. We're going to do this together. It flips back, and AJ is fishing. And it's a spot that you'd been to before in previous episodes. It's outside of the school. He's fishing for food for the school. And there's this awesome pit bull named Rose, who is kind of like the school mascot.
Mm-hmm.
And she's chilling with AJ. And at one point, because she had lost it in the river, at one point you see the D hat, and it comes cruising down the river, and AJ's like, "Oh my god, it's Clem's hat! I got to get this hat!" And so he's trying to reach, and then finally Rose jumps in the water, grabs the hat, and she's like, "Oh my god, you were such a great dog! Thank you so much!" And AJ hugs the dog. And it's a fantastic little point. So he's got her hat. It is totally wet and dirty, but he kind of gives it a little hug, and he snaps it to his belt loop, and he's got his fish, and he's going back to the thing. And so there you are in control of AJ, and instead of having the thought bubbles or the little things that you choose for conversations at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
where they kind of normally had them throughout the whole thing, they line up and down vertically on the side of the screen for AJ. And so you're making actual, choices, and you're saying hi to people. And you kind of visit with everybody in the school. And then finally they turn, and coming out of the main door is Clementine with a crutch. He cut her leg off. And so in the same, kind of the same way that Lee tried to help himself, except he wasn't soon enough, he didn't get it close enough. They got her. She's okay. And so you're in control of AJ, and she's walking down with this crutch, and he goes, "Hey, Clem, I found this." And she looks at it, and she goes, "Oh my God, my hat. Thank you so much." And she's like, "You know what? I think you've earned this. You hold on to it." And so they've got this room in the school, and the whole time, one of the weird things they did is they added these little collectibles that you can put into the room. And so the fight, AJ makes his way back into the room after you finish talking to Clem and Lewis and kind of the rest of the kids, and he makes his way back into the room, and as he's walking to the room, in graffiti along the walls as you're walking there inside the school are the names of all the developers that kind of that made it over to Skybound to finish the game. And then he walks into the room, and you kind of put the collectibles down, and the very last one that you put down is the hat, and it says, "Are you sure you're ready to end this?" And so you have yes or no, and you choose yes, and he puts the hat down, and that's where the game ends. So Clem lives. And that I was very tempted when writing that review to say, based on this ending, this is no longer a Walking Dead game, because at the end of this game you have hope.
Yeah.
And there was every other one of these games ended with no hope whatsoever.
Right.
But at the end of this one, she had hope, and he did the right thing, and so you're left with these are the lessons that I taught AJ, and this is how we're gonna survive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder how that changes depending on other decisions that you can make.
I don't know. I can tell you this: I am not going back to find out. That is not one of those games that I will play multiple times to find out, where those decisions lead. That was
right.
The Walking Dead has always been this is the decision I made. That's what I'm living with. This is how I'm going to see this part of the story. This part of the story chime out.
Right. That's one of the things that I don't know. On one hand, I understand people's complaints with these types of games where most of the time it's really just the appearance of choice, not actual choice that you have, because whoever you save in episode 1 will die in episode 3, or something along those lines. And it's always kind of funneling you back to this critical path.
Yep.
But if the game can create the illusion that you're making impactful choices, then I feel like that's pretty much just as good.
Yeah.
As actually making choices.
And I think that's what I always appreciated about their games in particular, is the fact that I don't care that on the developer side of things, there is a web of choices that is storyboarded, that this is how this is going to play out. Because while I'm playing it, this is the choice that I'm making in the moment, and I'm not going back to see what else could happen.
Sure.
But yeah, that's it. That's the end of The Walking Dead. That's the end of The Walking Dead, the game. The show keeps going, the comics keep going, because there is no end of misery for those people.
Right. But maybe there can be, probably not an end, because it's still the apocalypse, but some respite.
Maybe.
For our dear Clementine.
Maybe. Hopefully. I did the best I could.
That's all you can do.
Yep. The best I could.
Well, I didn't even play, that game, but I feel like that was very cathartic. So thank you, Brian.
You're very welcome.
I hope it was for you as well.
It was. I will be honest, when I stared at that screen for the choice of whether or not to kill Clementine for a good 5 minutes. And when it went to the flashback, when it didn't show me, I was very distraught. And I almost yelled when he got back to the school and she walked out of the door. And I was like, holy crap, they did it. And I didn't think it would happen. I honestly thought that they were going to mirror episode 1 in such a way that I had a feeling that it was going to come down to her demise and what you were teaching Alvin. But I didn't think that they would go a different direction. And I am so happy they went a different direction than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was a very well done ending. The story does not make up for all of the technical shortcomings that had, and that I'm very thankful that that is the end. Because I just don't, especially with the direction they were kind of going with that, I don't think those games could hold together anymore.
Sure.
I think they did everything they could with that, and they did their best. And so for that, I will always be thankful for that story. It was a good arc. It had some low points. It had some very high points. But we did reach an end, and that's not something you could say for a lot of stuff that goes on that long.
Right. Well, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me and sharing your thoughts on all of The Walking Dead, and most specifically this most recent season, the final season. We will be back in just a moment, though, to talk about more and other video game things.
Bye, Internet.
Well, that does it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. You can find more information about the games we discussed below if you're listening on YouTube, or in the show notes for this episode on darkstation.com. There you can also find the DarkCast Interviews podcast, as well as other video game reviews, previews, and features. Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at darkstation_com, find us on Facebook, check us out on YouTube, and email us at podcast@darkstation.com. For Mark Steigner, Brandon Boyd, and Brian Tyler, I'm Jonathan Miley. Thanks again, and until next time, have a good one.